Hello! Sorry I'm a little late, and if you were watching a moment ago, although I don't seem to have a lot of people on the stream, sorry that you got 3 minutes of me talking with absolutely no sound. So I'm here to talk to you today about a passion of mine. So I love... firstly, this stream is provisionally or mainly for me to do with my writing as a way to kind of explore writing and talking to people about writing and effectively providing a forum for what I do in terms of that. But I can't do that every day because it's quite a lot of effort. And I wanted to actually use some of the days where I'm not writing to talk about one of my passions, and that is radio drama. Since I was quite young, ever since I actually heard BBC Radio 4's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, I have been in love with radio drama. I even listened to The Archers, and you can't really talk about radio drama without talking about BigFinish.com. Now, Big Finish is a company that has been producing radio drama, or not radio drama, but audio drama since 1999. They currently describe themselves as purveyors of audiobooks, and I do think that sells them a little short, because for me, an audiobook is a narrated story. It's where somebody reads a book out, sometimes with a bit of music and sound effects, but generally it's somebody reading a book. What Big Finish generally do, they do some audiobooks, but generally what they do is full cast audio drama. They've been doing it for 21 years now, and they are terrific at it. The amount they produce is absolutely crazy. I mean, I have to select the things that I want to listen to because I couldn't buy everything they produced because they produced so much. So they started in 1999. Now, in the 90s, when Doctor Who was off television, a company called Virgin Books, which I presume is related to the Richard Branson thing, don't know, guess it is, but Virgin Books produced original Doctor Who stories, initially starring the Doctor Who and companion combination that ended on the television, the Seventh Doctor and Ace, as played on the television by Sophie Aldred. They fairly quickly introduced a new companion called Bernice Summerfield. Several years later, the BBC decided to start producing the books in-house. I think it was in 1996 when Paul McGann played the Doctor in the dreadful TV movie. Paul McGann wasn't dreadful, the movie was. So the BBC decided they took the license from Virgin Books, and so what Virgin did quite brilliantly was they continued telling stories using a character they'd created, Bernice Summerfield. In 1999, Big Finish released their first radio CD audio adaptation, which was of one of in fact was the first sole Bernice Summerfield book. I think it was called Oh No It Isn't. It featured a lot of cast members that you'd recognise from Doctor Who, including the wonderful Nicholas Courtney who played the Brigadier. He played a cat in this, don't ask, it's a very silly story. But from that point onwards they went from strength to strength. They started producing Bernice Summerfield stories every year. They've changed the format a lot over the years. So the first 5 or 6 were based on books, and then everything after that has been their own stuff, and the storyline within that has evolved, and they have actually been producing that for 20 years. They've produced something to do with Bernice every year for 21, 22 years now. It's great. In 2000 they started producing monthly 2-disc Doctor Who sets. So the very first one featured Doctors 5, 6 and 7 and was called The Sirens of Time, and they released those initially every other month, but fairly quickly, I think it was either in 2000 or 2001, they started producing a play a month. On top of that, they started producing Doctor Who spin-offs. Initially, there was a Sarah Jane Smith series that only got nixed when she started appearing on the new revamped television series. They did a series called Dalek Empire, which is, I think it was their first spin-off that didn't feature the Doctor. Hit and miss, but when it was good, it was really good. And the other thing, when I sometimes say this wasn't one of their greatest releases, because Big Finish do what they do so well, a mediocre Big Finish release would probably be considered cracking if it was released by anybody else. They're consistently that good. So they did Dalek Empire, they did a mini-series called Cyberman, they did a series starring the original unit cast. They've now done a series starring the new unit cast. They've got Tom Baker records like 16 plus episodes for them every year. Paul McGann does something similar. All of the Doctors that are alive from the original series now regularly contribute to the show. Paul McGann has, I think I've already mentioned that, Paul McGann has a series. On top of that, you've got spin-offs based on both the old series and the new series. So you've got the wonderful Gallifrey that tells you about what happened to Leela and Romana in Gallifrey, which has been going for years. You had the wonderful Jago and Lightfoot spin-off characters from a Tom Baker story called The Talons of Weng Chiang, which ran for 30. It only stopped when one of the actors sadly passed away. I mean, he wasn't a young man, but it was an amazing show. The characters were wonderful. From the new series, they've done a series based on the new unit with Kate Stewart and Osgood. They've done a series of the Paternoster gang with the three Victorian I can't remember the names of the characters, Madame Vastra, Strax, and Jenny. The characters from that interacted a lot with the 11th Doctor and also was with the 12th Doctor's first story. They've done a Time War series. They've done with the War Doctor before John Hurt passed away. They've done a Time War series with Paul McGann. They've done a Time War series about what the Master was during the war with what the Master was doing during the Time War with Derek Jacobi. And everything I mentioned, there's absolutely tons of Doctor Who stuff, and it's all really, really good. On top of that, they've also been releasing stuff that's nothing to do with Doctor Who. So they did an adaptation of the 1960s TV show The Prisoner. They've done stuff they've basically made on audio the first series of The Avengers, which is mainly, apart from an episode or two, missing. They've done comic strip adaptations from The Avengers. They've done so much stuff. They do a series based on Terrorhawks. They've done some of their own series that aren't necessarily science fiction in origins. They did an amazing 6-part play during the time of Cicero. They've got several ranges of Torchwood stories. So they've kind of got an official 5th and 6th season plus monthly releases. It goes on. They've got an actor who does a really good John Pertwee, who is now working with Katie Manning to produce more stories from the 3rd Doctor era that sound like they're from the 3rd Doctor era. I'm going to stop gushing because I cannot enthuse enough about how good the stuff that they do is, and it isn't all Doctor. They've done Hamlet. They've done. Go to bigfinish.com, have a look at what they've done. Now, I'm going to stop enthusing because that's quite boring to watch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, when on days when I'm not doing a writing Twitch stream, I'm going to do a review of a Big Finish production. Some of them will be old ones, some of them will be new ones. Today, I'm reviewing a CD that was released today. Well, the CD wasn't released today, but the download was released today. We'll get the CD when the warehouse opens up, when the coronavirus ends. If the coronavirus ends, I'm not convinced, but there you go. So, Shadow of the Sun. So the first thing I'm going to do, if I can press the right button on here, is play you their trailer to Shadow of the Sun.
First officer, it's possible we have a stowaway situation. And if anyone on board knows what's happened to Professor Nicely, I think I know who to ask first.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, The Fourth Doctor Adventures, Shadow of the Sun.
This is the Gold Star Line. The purpose is glamour, recreation, and living it up like it's $24.99.
Is it me, or is it getting warm down here?
You are correct, Miss Crisp. The temperature has risen by 3.8 degrees centigrade since we arrived.
In Heliotopia's warm embrace, we shall be set free.
In Heliotopia's warm embrace, we shall be set free.
Lady Melina, have you seen my dog or a young woman dressed in animal hide?
I don't like parties much either, Miss
Leela.
In just over an hour from now, we shall have proven the existence of Heliotopia once and for all.
In 1 hour from now, the ship will be vaporized. Don't you understand?
Now, Professor. Passengers aren't allowed on the lower decks unless there's an emergency. And there is no emergency, is there, Professor?
No emergency at all, apart from the fact that we're all going to die.
Big Finish. We love stories.
Yes, this'll do. Perfectly safe.
Is he correct, K9?
Amelia, why are you asking him?
Insufficient data.
K9 is more cautious than you, Doctor.
I'll have you know that my middle name is Prudence.
Is it?
Intriguing stuff. I forgot to turn my microphone on again then. So what I did was, obviously we're allowed out now. We're allowed to go on walks occasionally. Well, actually, in fact, I think we're allowed to go out. So I quite often listen to my big finishes whilst going for a walk around a local country park. And so that's what I did today. There have been a couple of things that I've been thinking about regarding this story. So I actually, whilst I was on my walk, just before I listened to it, recorded my thoughts of what was going through my head about this production immediately before I listened to it. So I did some ridiculous link where I think it looks like I'm pretending I'm handing over to myself. So over to myself outside in the past. Thank you, Andrew. Well, one of the things that really interests me about this particular production, there's a few actually. So it was only announced very, very recently. And I suspect it's been planned for a while. But it was recorded during lockdown. I think it was recorded on the 6th, or one of the dates they recorded was the 6th of April. So it was probably due to go in the studio around about that time anyway, but they decided to not go into the studio because of the coronavirus. So that's the first thing that interests me. I now tend to listen to these things through headphones. I am on a walk, and basically the reason I'm going for my walk today, I'm going to listen to Shadow of the Sun as I go. So I listen to them on high quality headphones, and I'll be very interested to see, from a kind of technical point of view, will I notice that it's been recorded in a different way? Because I suppose if the recording at the individual locations is as good as what they would achieve in the studio, then I won't be able to tell. So I'm just curious about that. There's a couple of other things I'm curious about. So this is one that they only announced very recently. As I said, it was only announced last month, and I suspect that was because until they knew they were definitely able to record it, they weren't going to announce it. So there's that's interesting about it. The other thing that I'm curious about, if I'm totally honest, is there's a member of cast called Jane Slavin. Well, she's not listed in the cast, but there is a Zoom photo of one of the recording sessions. Now, in a series released, I think it was in 2018, she played a new companion for the Fourth Doctor, for Tom Baker's Doctor, one that wasn't featured in the TV show, that had a very interesting story trajectory. And I'm not going to spoil it here, but I'll be very interested to see if Jane Slavin is playing that same character, or because I look for on the production credits in case, because quite a lot of the actors get involved in directing and stuff like that as well. So I was wondering maybe if she was directing rather than playing a part in it, but it doesn't seem that she is. So I'll be fascinated to see what she's doing and see if it is a return of that character. So yep, I'm about to do my legally allowed 1 hour mandatory walk, which should be enough for me to listen to Shadow of the Sun, which is what I'm going to do now. So over to my future self back in the studio, who has listened to it. Right now I haven't. Bye bye. Thank you, Andrew, in the past. I forgot to turn my microphone on again. That definitely didn't look like a very good transition because there was no audio. So, here is my review of this. So the first thing to say about this release is how impressed I was with it technically. I genuinely thought that at some point I would hear the limitations of recording in, I'm guessing, the actors' homes. And I have to say that I listened to it on a decent pair of headphones, which I think would have highlighted if there had been any problems, or if the recording had been at all inferior. Because of the speed that I've recorded this review in, I haven't been able to listen to the extras that come on the CD and on the end of the download, which would no doubt have highlighted the additional effort they had to go into to make this production sound as good as they did. But I was impressed. And whilst I'm on the subject, it would appear that the picture of Jane Slavin on the notes on the website was a red herring, darn it, and they did that on purpose. Of course they did. So as I said, I'm extremely pleased about how good this production sounds. Initially, a lot of the scenes seemed to be in noisy places like parties or airlocks or places with much background noise, and I assume that might be deliberate, because I guess it's easy to hide deficiencies in recording if there's a lot more going on in the soundscape. But I am pleased to report that there are also quieter scenes set in places where all this wasn't going on, and they also sound terrific. So what it does mean is if the actors are not able to return to the studio in the near future, which it's looking pretty likely, let's face it, it does mean that we will still get some output from Big Finish. Maybe not as much as when they were recording in the studios, but at least, you know, they will still be doing stuff for us to take our minds off what is going on. The next thing I want to talk about is the cast. Tom Baker is always good value, and I have no idea how the guy's voice hasn't aged. So if you listen to Colin Baker or Peter Davison in plays they do for Big Finish, neither of them, in a nice way, sounds exactly like they did in the 1980s when they're on television. That's not a criticism, it's just a fact of ageing. But somehow, both Tom Baker and Louise Jameson, who is, as usual, absolutely wonderful as Leela, the leather-clad savage, they sound exactly the same as they did when they did the show in the 70s. And add to that the canine vocal talents of John Leeson, who plays K9. That was a really bad joke. It really sounds like it came from the late 1970s. It's wonderful how they've managed to pull that off. No other era of the show is quite... what they do is fantastic, but because, you know, Colin Baker sounds a little, you know, his voice is a little different, Peter Davison's is a bit gravelier, they don't sound the same. These guys sound identical. I am particularly fond of this and of course this pair, and Louise Jameson has become an icon in Doctor Who fandom. She's been so positive about her experience on the show, even though we're talking 45 years ago now. She's a wonderful ambassador for it, and plays a wonderful character. The other thing that I really like is how she's been heavily involved in writing and I think directing as well some of the Big Finish original plays. One I did forget to mention in my list earlier of Big Finish originals was something they've done called Attagirls, which is about effectively the RAF female pilots who used to position the aircraft from where they were to where they needed them for the next attack. So they didn't take them into battle, but I hope this is understanding script, but they used to get the planes into the right airfields so the pilots that were going into battle could do that. I haven't listened to it. I've heard it's absolutely amazing. The only reason I haven't bought it isn't because I don't want to. I think it sounds great. My pockets are like rinsed just buying all the Doctor Who stuff. The rest of the cast in this are pretty good too. Barnaby Edwards plays two characters. Now, Barnaby Edwards is someone who's been around with Big Finish since day one. In this, he plays both the autopilot and Hicks, the first officer of the spaceship the story is set on. And it's got to be a bit of a tribute to him. Firstly, I didn't recognise either of the voices as Barnaby Edwards, and he's got a fairly distinctive voice. I mean, not talking as distinctive as Nick Briggs. Poor old Nick. You can speed him up, slow him down, pitch him up, pitch him down. It's just, oh, it's Nick. Bless him. And Barnaby has been around as long. You know, they both were in this thing together when they started in 2000. So, you know, Barnaby does have a very recognisable voice as well, and yet I recognise neither of the characters he played in this. And of course, continuing the radio tradition of cast members playing more than one role, I didn't actually immediately recognise John Leeson, who usually plays K9, as the short-lived Professor Nicely, who met a sticky end very early in the story. Paul Hertzberg is a suitably crazy Professor Zorn, and the remaining cast seem to enjoy their roles and play them well. The story itself is... I'm going to say it's a basic story, but I don't mean that as a criticism. This is a spoilerific review, so if you don't wish to have anything about the story spoiled, switch off now. I'll give you a few seconds. Still here? Good. Right, so this is about a series of worshippers of a religion that have hired a spaceship for a private event, the climax of which then tend to fly the spaceship into the sun. Their leader, Zorn, has convinced them that instead of burning up in the atmosphere of the gas giant, they will enter what he calls Heliotopia, which is, I presume, a bit like the Promised Land, only, well, hotter. Anyway, quite how anybody could fall for something like that when this story is set. Oh, sorry, quite how we could fall for that now, beggars belief, let alone a story set in the future with spaceships. I mean, by then, you'd have thought science would be king, but oh no, Zorn still managed to get a group of nutjobs happy to follow him to the death. Whilst well played, the character did leave me asking a few questions. I almost wanted him to be a crazed killer who didn't really believe in the stuff he was telling his acolytes. He just wanted to commit suicide and take a lot of people with him. But that didn't seem to be the case. He truly seemed to believe that he was going to live in the heart of this sun. And the other thing is, I was half expecting a twist towards the end of the story. It seems apparent that the worshippers all die towards the climax of the story. And I think I would have enjoyed it more if the ending had been a little more open-ended, if maybe it was ambiguous. I'm not saying necessarily I wanted to see them actually getting into Heliotopia, but I maybe would have liked an ending that wasn't quite as clear-cut, telling you that they didn't. And I think it would have left you asking a lot more questions when the final music played. Add into this, you've got a first officer who kind of believes the ship is going to burn when it flies into the sun, and has effectively placed a bet on the fact so that he earns loads of money. And of course, he has a way out, like all protagonists of that kind do in this kind of story, and of course he doesn't get to use it. I particularly enjoyed the scene at the end where this first officer, he's kind of on the ship with these crazed nutters who think they are going to some kind of strange heaven, and decides that the only thing he can do as he waits to die is get pissed in the meantime. There was a moment during the play where I thought there might be a character that we'd not heard in the first episode. The ship's autopilot does follow some orders from a mysterious source, and all we hear are some sort of strange bleepy bloopy noises, and if I'm honest, I was hoping that's where Jane Slavin would come into it, but I was very wrong. She didn't. It turned out to be Hicks all along. I was quite sad about what happened to Captain Brandis at the end of the story as well. The Doctor initially offered to do the deed that would save everyone. And there's a side of me that just wished to explain to the Captain what a respiratory bypass system was. And the fact that he would probably survive being blown out of the airlock when the Captain definitely wouldn't. But no, he let him die. Yeah, the Captain sort of forced him at gunpoint into the escape shuttle, but I just thought the Doctor gave in a little bit too easily here. I just feel he would have at least tried to tell him, look, I can survive this, you definitely won't. It probably wouldn't have changed anything. Captains do seem to have this going down with their ship thing in their heads, and it's a minor quibble, it doesn't spoil the story. A couple of things that really did make me smile. Firstly, I'm a bit of a Trekkie. So of course, the name of the bad guy, Zorn, did make me think of Groppler Zorn, the character in the pilot episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Add to that, there's a bit where the computer basically uses flashing lights, green on this occasion, or arrows, to guide you to a location you've asked for, and it was getting a little bit Encounter at a Farpoint for my taste. I'm sure those weren't deliberate references as well, but I quite enjoyed them. So although I kind of described the story as average or nothing special, I actually really enjoyed it. The first episode had a really good cliffhanger, and even though the resolution at the start of part 2 was not a cop-out, this is also a Doctor Who tradition, and I can't hold it against the story. It sounds great, the actors give it their all, and for a release, to be honest, that I wasn't expecting, once I heard about it, dreading, because I was really worried about the audio quality, I was pleasantly surprised in every way. It is available at bigfinish.com for £8.99 for the download, or £10.99 plus shipping for the CD. Although they can't say when the CD is going to be mailed out because of staffing issues, because of coronavirus. Not that, as far as I know, anybody's been ill. They proactively shut down their warehouse to make sure all their staff were safe. So you can get the CD eventually. You can get the download now. As I said earlier, if you are someone who doesn't live in the UK, download's probably your best bet anyway, because it will cost you a heck of a lot less when you take shipping into consideration. So, Shadow of the Sun, really enjoyed it. Wasn't expecting it, really enjoyed it, really appreciated the effort that's gone into it. I'm now going to listen to the extras to see exactly what they had to do to make it sound as good as that, because I'm sure it wasn't all plain sailing. And my plan is to be back at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock GMT, so 9 o'clock UK time. this Sunday to look at another release that they've done this month, which is a continuation of the television series from the 1970s called Time Slip. I have a trailer for that, which I'm going to end on. Seriously, check out their website. As I say, as well as talking about new stuff, I will be going through their back catalogue and doing some reviews of other stuff in the future as well, possibly before Sunday. They're going to be a little bit ad hoc. If you don't catch them on the live stream, they are automatically uploaded to my YouTube channel. I can actually put that up. There we go. It's just search for Richard A. Boxall on Facebook and YouTube. A lot of what you see on there, frankly, is going to be me talking about my writing, but the stuff that isn't will be labelled Big Finish Review, so you'll be able to see that. So, as I say, I'm going to end on the trailer for the new Time Slip adventure, which is called The Age of the Death Lottery, I believe. So here it is, and that's the end of the show, and I will talk to you again in a few days' time.
We're sleepwalking into disaster because we are not doing enough now.
Hey, you don't need to convince me.
Is that him?
Hello, Simon.
Liz, the barrier has appeared again.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions, Time Slip, The Age of the Death Lottery.
A bubble of time. A bubble that drifts outside of the rules of normal physics across other time phases.
What's that? I was heading for the steps when I bumped into it.
People might even find themselves caught inside one of these bubbles.
It's like a wall, an invisible wall.
A doorway in whatever barrier exists between the two.
And that sound.
Sam? Why can't we see him?
Maybe it's an optical illusion? We're in 2020.
You came through the time barrier. From what time?
We're from 1982.
The barrier has opened again.
I'm going through.
Me too. Come on, Jade. Let's go.
Liz, we're in the year 2042.
It seems so.
Hey, I haven't done anything!
Run, Neil!
What are those?
Stun buttons. For the last time, state your numbers.
Everyone has numbers.
We don't.
I find that hard to believe. It's the death lottery. If your number's drawn, you die.
And now, to present this exceptional 166th Death Lottery, your Minister of Enforcement!
It can't be. What is it? I'd like to know why it's reappeared now. The barrier being in another time phase. After so many years. We know almost nothing about it. And at times it seemed the rules for how it affected us in these other times were changeable.
Oh, my head! Oh, no! Liz! No, wait. Where are you taking me? Say something!
I just want to get back to 1982, where there aren't thugs in uniforms with electric truncheons.
You asked for it!
I'm really puzzled by you lot. I've still no idea where you came from or why you had no numbers.
We're time travellers.
That's very funny.
I appreciate it sounds fantastic, but at the Ministry of Forward Development, we need open minds to do our job.
Jade!
Come back!
Well, shall I go again?
Big Finish. We love stories.